Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to tackle something in English that can trip up just about anybody, irregular verbs. But don't you worry, because we are going to break down the 50 most important ones into some really simple, memorable patterns that'll make using them correctly a total breeze.
So, have you ever stopped and wondered about this? Why do some verbs just follow this nice, simple rule while others seem to have a mind of their own? Well, the secret all comes down to understanding the difference between regular and irregular verbs, and that's exactly what we're going to break down today.
Okay, let's start with the absolute basics. Most verbs in English are regular. That just means you add ed to make them past tense, right? Walk becomes walked. Easy. But an irregular verb? Oh, it's a rule breaker. It completely ignores that rule and transforms in its own special way. Now, if you actually look at the total number of irregular verbs in English, yeah, it can feel a little intimidating. We're talking about over 200 of them, and that is a lot to try and memorize. But here is the really, really good news. So many of those verbs are super rare. You absolutely do not need to know all 200 to be a fluent, confident English speaker. Not even close.
The real magic number you need to focus on is 50. Seriously, if you can get a handle on just these 50 most common irregular verbs, you are going to be covered for pretty much any everyday conversation you can think of. Now that feels a lot more doable, doesn't it?
And here's how we're going to do it. Instead of just memorizing a long, boring list, we're going to look for patterns. We'll start with the easiest group, then we'll check out some cool vowel swaps, a very common sound family, and then we'll finish up with those few unique verbs you just have to know. All right, let's dive in. So we are starting with the absolute simplest group because, hey, who doesn't love an easy win to get started? These are the verbs that just stay the same, no matter what tense you're using. Just take a look at verbs like put and let. The base form, the past tense, and the past participle are all identical. Today I put, yesterday I put, I have put. See? It's actually beautifully simple, isn't it?
So let's see this in a sentence. Is this happening now, or did it happen yesterday? Well, you can't actually tell without more context, precisely because the verb put doesn't change. And that's our first pattern, the no-change verbs.
Okay, on to our next group. This one follows a very predictable vowel changing pattern, and believe me, it is one of the most common ones you are ever going to run into. You see the logic here, right? The main vowel in the base form is an A. Then in the simple past, it flips to an A. And for the past participle, it changes to a U. So you get begin, began, begun, drink, drank, drunk. Once you see this IAU pattern, it just clicks for this entire group of words. In this sentence, we know for a fact it's the simple past because of that A in drank. Now, if we wanted to use the present perfect tense, we'd say she has drunk the entire bottle, just following that oo pattern. It's an incredibly consistent rule for this whole group.
All right, our next group is linked together not by a vowel swap, but by a very common spelling and sound in their past forms. Let's call this the GHT family.
Check this out. You've got 4 totally different sounding verbs in their base form: bring, buy, think, teach. And they all just snap into this ought or ought form for both the past and the participle. The spelling is a tiny bit different, but that ought sound is the key. You'll learn one, you've pretty much learned them all.
For example, brought is the past tense of bring, and what you'll notice is that the past participle is exactly the same. She had already brought the chocolates. This is a really, really useful pattern to have in your back pocket.
All right, it's time to meet the rebels. These are the verbs that just don't fit neatly into any kind of pattern. But because they're so incredibly common, they are absolutely essential to know. The 2 absolute superstars of this group are be and go. I mean, the verb to be is the single most used verb in the entire English language, and it's also the most irregular one, with all its forms like was, were, and been. And then you have go, which completely changes to went in the past, a word that looks nothing like the original. These 2 are the source of so many mistakes, so they're definitely worth memorizing on their own. And here's another one of those fun little quirks in English. The verb read is spelled exactly the same in the present and the past, but the pronunciation changes. You say I read, like read, every day for the present tense, but yesterday I read, like read, a book. The only way you can tell the difference is from the context. And speaking of quirks, some of these unique verbs show up in really common idioms.
Take the verb stand, for example. Its past tense is stood, and it's the star of the phrasal verb to stand someone up. So what does that mean? It means you made plans with someone, but they just never showed up. It's a perfect example of how these verbs are woven right into the fabric of everyday language. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? It's simple, really. You do not need to sit down and memorize a list of 50 verbs one by one. The real key, the master key, is to just recognize the patterns that we've been talking about. This is it. This is your master key. Just remember the groups. You've got the super easy no-change verbs. You've got the IAU vowel swap pattern. You've got the GHT sound family. And finally, those essential unique verbs like be, go, and do. Thinking in these patterns instead of just lists is by far the most effective way to master all of this. And that brings us to one last thought. You know, language is always changing, it's always evolving. Hundreds of years ago, a lot more verbs were irregular. Today, some are actually becoming more regular. It kind of makes you wonder, which of our normal rule-following verbs today might become the quirky rule breakers of the future? Something to think about. Thanks so much for watching.